when you're sitting on TikTok after letting your eyes bleed for 3 hours and it's 4 in the morning and you're like, it's time to get my life together, right? But it doesn't feel like that most days. Most people who don't go through it and have the consistency behind it have this preconceived idea that that's how it is. But the reality is like, it's not like it. It's not like however you think it is at all. And the people that do have these habits built, the people that you admire and aspire to become like, don't feel like doing it when it's time to do it, whatever it is that they're doing. All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to episode number 9, 10, 9. I'm thinking 9 of the Jason Scalora show, back with my boy, Jason Tifford. First time on my show. We had an episode a week or so ago where I was on his channel. You can find Jason Tifford. We'll give all your information out at the end. But today, we didn't really know what to talk about. We were kind of chilling beforehand. He played a little bit of a guitar riff, which was fucking sick, which I will put right now. All right. Riff for me, dog. That's fucking sick, dude. I listened to a TikTok the other day, and it's a quote from Bill Burr, and I don't know, this shit just hit different. So I'm gonna play for you guys, and then we'll go from there.
Realize that sleeping on a futon when you're 30 is not the worst thing. You know what's worse? Sleeping in a king bed next to a wife you're not really in love with, but for some reason you got married and you got a couple kids and you got a job you hate. You'll be laying there fantasizing about sleeping on a futon. There's no risk when you go after a dream. There's a tremendous risk to playing it safe.
What are your thoughts?
That cuts deep, dude. It cuts deep. I think a lot of the times we do things, we're very heavily influenced to do things that we're either scared not to do or things that we desire for external validation. And I know I just went like a lot deeper than that TikTok is at the surface, but at the same time, a lot of the times we're afraid to do what we really want to do. And a lot of the times it's because we don't know what we really want to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's immediately what I thought about too. When I had first heard this, one of the things that was on my mind all the time, that I just kept thinking about was having a plan B. And I've been talking about this a lot on my podcast and other podcasts, but I don't care. I'm going to keep talking about it just because it's something that I really need to drill into people's brains, which is that people. Well, I'll give you the backstory first. So, I want to make sure I'm not offending anybody directly. I don't want them to know that you might know it's you if you're listening to this, but I don't want people to know objectively who I'm talking about here. But I had a meeting with somebody, and basically it was sort of like an advising session, sort of. And they were talking to me about life, talking to me about my job. They were talking about a bunch of stuff. And then we got down to college classes and how that's going and how I'm going in my degree, like how, the whole nine. And he asked me, he's like, okay, so what do you see yourself doing? Because I'm going to be a senior this after this summer. And he said, what are you going to do after you graduate? So I was like, all right, well, what I'm doing right now is I'm going to keep going on the path I'm on, content creation, coaching, and then hopefully get into things like seminars and giving speeches. Like that's what I'm going to do. Build my business, build my brand.
Hell yeah.
And then what he had asked me, he was like, oh, that's awesome. I really like that. I was like, thanks. And he's like, but what's your plan B? Like, what's your fallback plan? And immediately in my brain, I'm like, I don't fucking have a fallback plan. Like the thoughts never even crossed my mind to like have a plan B. And then it really got me thinking. Well, first of all, in the moment, I was like, "Oh, well, I'll do clinical therapy. That's what I'm going to do if shit doesn't work out." It was a lie. It was a straight up lie. It was just bullshit. And because I just didn't know what to say, and I felt like in the moment, like I had to have a plan B. But then when I got to think about it later, I was like, "Why the fuck would I have a plan B? Why would you have a plan B? The only reason why anybody ever has a plan B is when they get scared of plan A, or when plan A starts to not work out 100%, or whatever happens with plan A where there's bumps in the road or whatever the fuck happens. But then you resort to plan B and then resent your whole life and live in regret. And that's what I was talking about with this whole quote, which is like, you can be 30 years old, have the quote unquote perfect life with the wife and the kids and the white picket fence and the fat paycheck because you're having a nice job as an accountant or whatever the fuck you're doing that you hate doing. And you have all these benefits and yada, yada, yada. But you'll be fantasizing about sleeping on a futon being broke. But why? Why? Because you didn't go for plan A. You went for plan B. And that's where the fuck plan B puts you, right? And I don't know. For me, it's just like, lately I've been trying to do my best to drill that into people's brains where it's like you have to dispense with the idea that having a plan B has any comfort attached to it. There's no such thing as a safety net. And the reason is because you're going to die one day. There's no safety net. It's a fucking illusion. The worst thing that can happen to you is for you to die. That's it. Why are you going to go throughout your whole fucking life living out a plan B life? You know what I'm saying? Especially when, as corny as it sounds, whether you believe in God, the universe, doesn't matter, has gifted you with certain gifts. Everybody's good at their own shit. I know it sounds like cliche and corny. Like, everybody's good at whatever they're good at. Like, you're so unique and special in your own way. But like, it's so fucking true. Like, if you dig deep and fucking have a deep exploration on yourself, you will figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at, and where those things overlap of what you're willing to do in terms of figuring out how you can turn that into a career. And to think that somebody's going to recommend to somebody else that you should have a plan B and pursue that, or at least have it there as a safety net, is just, it blows my mind. It really just blows my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to this thing of how people have this plan B because they don't really know a lot of the times what it is that they want to do. And a lot of that could be for various reasons. It could be because we have social media and we're constantly like, next, what's next? And we don't take as much time to sit down and process things and understand what it is that drives us. And when a lot of the times when we're sitting in boredom, when we're sitting alone with our thoughts, that is where these waves of inspiration can come and kick in, and we can find what it is, what we want to do. Right. So absolutely, I 100% believe that people should go after what it is that they love. But before one even does that, they need to understand what it is they love so that they can pursue that without a plan.
Right. How do you think people should go about that, right? So let's say, for example, hypothetically, a junior in high school, right, starting to look at colleges, going through that whole process of applying and whatnot, and is now in a spot where like he doesn't really know what he wants to do because he doesn't really know what he's good at. He's trying to figure out the whole purpose thing. Like, what advice would you recommend to that person?
Yeah, I would say there's two parts to this. One is go out and have all these different experiences and different things that even interest you just a tiny bit. Even if it's something that you're like, oh, my friends might think this is weird. Like, try to let go of the external judgment that are holding you from doing the things that interest you. Go out, try those things, and it's perfectly fine if you don't like something. That's good. That's good data. Right. You move on, you try something else. 100%. But also make sure to carve out the time for yourself to understand what it is about those certain things that you do like, or what it is about those things that you don't like, and then continue to move forward.
Right. No, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, that's the number one thing I recommend, especially when I have kids that are a little bit younger than I am in high school. And they're asking me, they're like, oh, I don't have my fucking purpose figured out. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, everybody else does. First thing I tell them is like, listen, I don't care how convincing they seem. 99% of those kids, maybe there's a handful that have actually gone through the experiences that they need to and actually know what it is that they're passionate about, what their quote unquote purpose is. But 99% of those people are lying through their fucking teeth to you. They have no idea what the fuck they're good at. They're just as scared as you are. And the way that they're coping with that is by lying about it so that they have this fake sense of certainty, so that when they have that terrible, terrifying conversation of, oh, what are you going to major in college, that they have this cookie cutter answer that they can just spit out, even though they don't mean a fucking word that they're saying. But the part that I completely agree with is like, you just got to experience shit, right? And it's like, I don't know, as corny and stupid and like basic as it sounds, it's like it's the truest thing, because there's so much complexity of human beings in life. It's like, for you to think that you can just sit there and just meditate or whatever the fuck you think you could do passively to figure out what it is that you like and what your quote unquote purpose is ludicrous. Like, it's just not going to happen. You have to go out and experience things, right? And through that experience, you're going to figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you're good at, what you're shit at, what you're kind of iffy at, and where those things overlap, right? Because for me, that's where your purpose is. I talk about this like I sound like a fucking broken record. Your purpose is the overlap, aka that where these things are the same, of what you're good at and what you love to do, right? And so if you're really fucking good at the guitar and you love doing it, that's a purpose, right? And side note, you don't just have one purpose, right? That's not how life works. You're not just only good and love one. There's not just one thing, right? It's not like Michael Jordan's only purpose was to play basketball and then ceases to be good at anything that he loves to do. Like, that's just doesn't work that way. But when you find those things, like, those are the things that you need to dive deeper into and see where you could branch out on, right? But until you go out and experience things, and it's just whatever the fuck it is, it could be anything. It could be sewing socks or going out and partying or like anything in between. Whatever it is that you're doing, that's how you're going to figure out what you enjoy doing and what you're good at doing, and in turn figure out your purpose and what you should be pursuing.
Yeah. And I think for kids that are coming to you or coming to anybody and they're like, I need my purpose.
Yeah.
Like, first take a step back, and you're coming from a place where you're craving this purpose. You're being needy about it rather than just letting it come to you. And
right,
because it's your purpose is just the expression of who you are authentically. Right. You're not doing anything because your mom wants you to, or because your friends want you to, or you're scared of what people think of you or how much money you'll make.
right.
But you're doing it because you genuinely love the process of doing it. And I know we talked about this last time. You're not going to love every second of it, but you're going to love what you're working towards.
100%. Yeah. Wait, what was it that you said? I was listening. I wasn't really listening. I got into deep thought after you said that. Right at the beginning. Why you got to figure out why, if you're craving that purpose, right, versus letting it come to you. Okay. Sorry. When you said that, immediately it made me think about, like, if you find yourself craving that, your purpose, craving that desire to figure out what it is that your quote unquote purpose is, you need to figure out why. You have to.
100%.
Because if you don't ask yourself why and do any digging on why you want to know your purpose so badly, you're probably going to never find it. Because 9 times out of 10, my guess would be, especially if you're a kid in high school or in college, wishing and just dying to know what the fuck is your purpose, the real reason why is because you're afraid of judgment. You're probably the same type of person that says, oh no, I just really want to be an accountant, just I'm good at math, and so I'm going to be a CPA. Like, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. So then you just have the cookie cutter answer that you can give to people so that you don't feel that casted judgment that you assume is associated with, I don't really know what I'm good at. I don't really know what I want to do. But think about it. The only people that are going to judge you for that are people who have played the same game. I grew up playing the same game. Their parents played the same game. Their parents playing the same game. They grew up around friends that played the same game. And they're all living out Plan B lives. They're all the same people on a couch they're all the same people in a bed with their wife or their husband, wishing that they had done it all differently back in their teens and 20s and pursued things that they were passionate about, whether it was art or the fucking guitar or whatever the fuck it is, right? But now they're an accountant or whatever the fuck they are, and wishing their lives had gone differently. Those are the people that are going to judge you. And you have to ask yourself, why do you give a fuck about their opinion? You probably don't. And so if you find yourself craving and having this deep just desire and feeling anxiety around not having your whole life figured out and figuring out what your quote unquote purpose is, as if there's only one, then you have to figure out why.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to that futon example too, like if people think about you a certain way, these people that have these thoughts of what you're doing, whatever it is, these are people that are going to be in and out of your life. This is not something that's permanent. Think of it as coming in as waves. Waves come in, they leave, but they're not always there. Think of yourself as the sand. If what you are doing is true to who you are and you're doing your quote unquote purpose, that will fulfill that so that it doesn't matter what other people think. But if you keep chasing what others think, you're never going to be grounded in who you are, and you're never going to be happy with what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and if you're focusing on what everybody else is thinking about you, what you think that they're thinking about you, you're never going to be focusing on and paying attention to the things that are actually pointing out to you what your purpose is, the things you actually like to do, right? Because if you walk around being afraid of judgment and thinking about, oh, what are they thinking of me? Or this other side of the coin of, oh, fuck them. Like, look at them. Look how stupid they are doing whatever the fuck they're doing. So if you're just feeling the judgment or casting the judgment instead of experiencing what you're experiencing, you're going to miss out on the whole entire point of what you're doing, right? Which is, why do I feel this way? What made me feel this way? What do I like about this? What do I hate about this? Was I good at this? Was I shit at this? Where am I in between? But if you're sitting there the whole time thinking about, oh, they're probably judging me, or I wonder what they think about me, or fuck that guy, or she's fat, or he's ugly, or whatever the hell you're thinking, then you're missing out on what your brain could actually be collecting and absorbing, which is, what do you like? What do you not like? What are you good at? What are you not good at? And so, yeah, for me, that's where it comes into play.
And that's where the meditation was really useful, because
So,
you go out, you experience these things, but when you come home, when you're let's say you're in your room, the meditation is useful to see, one, like, what is it that you like about certain things, what is it that you don't like, but then also to explore the attachments that you have to what people think about you. Like, ask yourself, why is it that you find yourself orienting more towards what one person thinks rather than someone else? Or why do you feel a desire towards chasing something, or why are you scared of something? That's where the meditation is really useful, because you can see how your actions are being controlled by how you're thinking. And once you realize that, then you can start to let go of that and find what it is that is true to just how you feel, rather than just pinging to what everybody else thinks.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's like, it's sort of like a rendering process, right? So like when you finish making a video, right? For those of you who don't know how editing works, when you finish editing a whole video, doing the audio, clipping everything up, doing whatever it is you got to do, at the end, before you can upload it anywhere, it does this rendering process, and the process takes a long time. A lot of times it takes like hours, right? And so it's just the finishing of the video, right? The video's done, everything's done, but it has a whole process time where you have to render the whole video. And that's what meditation does for your experiences of life, right? Because a lot of times you'll go through, and the lessons that you were supposed to take out, you didn't take out because you were in the moment. But if you could sit there and reflect and let your thoughts come up as they need to be, and not judge them for whatever you think you should be judging them for, and just let them exist as they are, you're going to pull out every single lesson you could ever imagine from every experience, whether good, bad, or just okay. And so I think that, for me at least, that's one of the number one. That's one that it's the number one benefit of meditation, and things like journaling, which is another, just a different form of meditation. The way that there's a podcast, Joe Rogan podcast with Naval Rav. Actually, I think we talked about this last time, but the way that that's my washing machine. Sorry.
I
Can you hear
can't hear
that?
it.
Oh,
No.
all right. Well, then perfect. It's so distracting. I'm sorry. It finished and it does this little song. You hear that?
This is a good time to pop in a Yeti advertisement
Yeah.
for how good the mic is.
Oh, dude.
Even though we're not sponsored.
We are not affiliated with Yetis, but holy shit, this thing's busting down. It's so good. Anyways, as I was saying, there's a Joe Rogan podcast with Naval Ravikant, and he's big on meditation, and spirituality and things like that. And the way he talks about meditation is amazing. He says meditation is essentially like an email inbox, and your thoughts are that email inbox. And over the years and past traumas and things that you've experienced are all these emails popping up, like all these emails that are just sitting in your inbox. And you haven't sat down or let yourself think through fully any of these things. So they just keep piling up and piling up and piling up. And you just have all this anxiety and all this depression and all these things that you haven't fully gotten over because all these things are just sitting there unresolved. And when you meditate, you allow those emails to come up one by one. And you just fully think through everything. And it doesn't mean that you solve the problem after you let all these emails come through and fully read them. It just means that you accept them for what they are. And take out what you need to take out, and then if you need to take action and fix what you need to fix. And that's the beauty of meditation, is you allow those experiences to teach you what you need to be taught and change what you need to change and understand what you need to understand.
Yeah, and it's not easy. It's not fun. It's much more appetizing or desirable to go and play video games or go scroll on through TikTok or
Let
do
your
all these
eyes
things.
bleed.
Yeah, but what you're doing, tell yourself what you're doing. This is the best thing that you could be doing
Right.
for your own personal development. Everyone wants to consume. But if you consume and you're just like on autopilot and you're a zombie and you're just meandering through life and you never take a look at why you're doing the things you're going to do or why you're doing the things that you're doing, you're not going to progress. You're going to be fighting these urges, but you're not going to understand why you are taking the path that you are. But that's really where this meditation practice is really important, because that's what is going to take you to the next step.
It's
And
so
like
important.
you said, it could be like your meditation practice. It could be journaling. It could be sitting and reflecting. Like mine is, I wake up in the morning and for like the first 30 minutes of the day, I just sit in my chair with a cup of tea and I just sit there and I think about how is what I'm doing in alignment with who I am. And I ask myself, am I being the realest version of myself, or am I doing things that are lying to myself? And then like at the end of the day, I take 10 or 15 minutes before I go to bed and I do the same thing. And it could be different. It could be sitting with your legs crossed. It could be on your balcony hanging off by your legs. It could be like whatever works for you.
Literally anything. Like I give this example all the time because people really, I really want to break the abstract. I want to break the confines that people put meditation in, which is that my my favorite way to meditate is to go golfing by myself. I'll go on the course and I love it, especially when it's like a 5 o'clock round where I'm by myself, the sun's setting, and it's nice out, and I'm just sitting there with my thoughts. No music, no one. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm not doing anything. I'm not forcing thoughts in. I'm not like, okay, now I'm gonna do the meditation process to figure out why my grandma hated me or whatever the fuck it is. And like, this is the meditation. Like, I don't force anything, and I don't force anything away. Right? Things just are how they are, and the thoughts that need to come up will come up. They just will, because your brain is waiting to shove them into your forefront, but you just won't let it because you're just sitting there like, oh, what is he doing today? How's Kim Kardashian's ass looking, or whatever the fuck that you're doing. Like, and until you decide to put the phone down and put the distractions away, as stupid and self-improvement-y as that sounds, like, the truth is, it's a fucking truth. And once you put those things away and stop constantly filling every single gap in your day with something that's going to stimulate you and distract you from your own thoughts, that's when the real you is going to show up. And that's when those thoughts and those things that are going to make you feel uncomfortable are going to show up. But there's a reason it's uncomfortable. And the reason is because that's what's going to bring you to the other side, to the better version of yourself.
Absolutely. And that point of the uncomfortable, if something is uncomfortable, if something comes up and it triggers you, that is, think of that as progress, as growing pains towards becoming more whole and more complete as who you are.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and like every single time anything like this comes up, I immediately think about the gym, because it's like it's the most tangible way to understand how all these areas of life work, right? Because if you want to go to the gym and build a bigger bicep, what do you have to do? Curls or whatever the hell you got to do to work out your bicep. But it's pain, like physically, it's painful, right? The lactic acid builds up in your arm and your muscles tear micro, or fucking tear macro, and then you have a torn muscle. But whatever it is, like you tear apart your muscle so that it rebuilds stronger than it was before, to deal with the tension and to deal with the overload, right? And that's the same thing with everything else, right? So like meditation, for example, you go through every single day and it's uncomfortable. Like your brain and your body doesn't want to do it. There's never been a day where I'm like, well, there have been days, but there's usually I don't want to like, I don't like walk in a room like, oh, can't wait to fucking sit down and stare at a wall for 20 minutes. Like it's not like something that I enjoy like getting into. Once I'm in it, it's a little different because I get the ball rolling and then I'm like in a better state of mind. But like everything else, like it's uncomfortable, but that discomfort is what's ultimately going to bring you to where you want to be and where you need to be and where the best version of you lies. And I don't know, a lot of people really just, whether consciously or subconsciously, have this idea that, and this notion that self-improvement is just some comfortable thing, right? Like if you're going to be meditating, it's like you just feel peaceful all the time. And if you're working out, you just feel determined all the time, or whatever it is. It's like, no. And most people who have any of these habits that do them consistently will tell you like that's not the case. It's never it's most of the time it's not the case, right? Most days when I want to go to the gym, I'm not sitting there like I'm just fucking inspired, I just feel great, like I can't wait to go. Like sometimes you get when you're sitting on TikTok after letting your eyes bleed for 3 hours and it's 4 a.m. and you're like, it's time to get my life together, right? But it doesn't feel like that most days, and most people who don't go through it and have the consistency behind it have this preconceived idea that that's how it is. But the reality is like it's not like it. It's not like however you think it is at all. And the people that do have these habits built, the people that you admire and aspire to become like, don't feel like doing it when it's time to do it, whatever it is that they're doing.
What are your thoughts on affirmations?
It depends on what you're it depends on what you're affirming. I think affirmations are only, for me, affirmations are only useful when they're affirming the truth, right? So if I believe, so like for me, every single morning I write down the same thing. I write, I'm disciplined, I'm attracting a fuck ton of money, I'm in phenomenal shape, and I'm a beautiful soul. And then I write, how can I serve you? And those are the things that I write down every single morning without missing. But those are things that I'm affirming that are already true in my mind, right? Because so in order for us to even get this conversation off the ground, we need to understand what is true. And for me, true is what you act out, right? A belief is what you act out, you believe, right? You can't tell me that you're not racist and then go and say racial slurs, right? Like it just doesn't make sense, right? Because your belief is a direct reflection of how you handle yourself and how you act, right? And so it's the same thing with affirmations. You can't affirm, in my eyes, you can't positive thinky bullshit your way into success, right? Otherwise, everybody would be doing it. I can't just say I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire, I'm a millionaire, and all of a sudden someone's gonna fucking shit out $1 million on my doorstep. It just doesn't fucking work that way. But if every single day you write down I'm a millionaire, and then for the rest of the day you're working your ass off to do whatever it is that you need to do to make that $1 million, that's going to help you tremendously to believe that you're a millionaire. And the reason why I think that is because a lot of times, as corny as it sounds, the law of attraction doesn't doesn't work as strongly if you're not constantly reminding yourself of what you are and what you're doing, right? Because there's it's like the tip of the iceberg, right? Because your actions are the things that are underneath, and you constantly need to remind yourself of what's underneath, of that you're putting in the time, you're putting in the effort, you're putting in the energy that's needed. And so when you do things like incantations or affirmations, if you want them to actually have any sort of benefit to you, in my eyes, if you want them to have any sort of benefit to you, you have to be acting it out in your life, in your habits, and in the things that you're actually doing on a daily basis.
Do you think that if someone who genuinely believed that they had all these characteristics, do you think that they would need to reaffirm those to themselves to justify it to themselves?
Well, yes, I just don't think justify is a good word. I think it's remind is a better word. Um, but like, I don't know, like, for example, body positivity, right? There's two sides to it, right? One side is maybe your standards are too high for your body, right? Maybe you're looking at all these Victoria's Secret models or whatever you're looking at and thinking that that needs to be you. And unless you fit that standard and fit that mold for your life, that you don't deserve to feel happy. At that point, yes, you should probably lower your standards, right? But that's a slight mental shift, right? But I don't think that just because your standards are too high for yourselves, which they can be, just because they're too high doesn't mean that you should dispense with the idea of having standards. You know what I'm saying?
That's that's interesting, but I would say that someone who thinks that way, like let's say there's a guy who goes to the gym, right? Let's say he has like body dysmorphia. Let's say he's very in good shape, 10% body fat, shredded,
Mm-hmm.
but he's constantly comparing himself to guys like Sebum, Schwarzenegger, like all these guys who are like Mr. Olympia
Mm-hmm.
caliber bodybuilders,
Yeah.
even though in reality that individual may be in good shape relative to whoever,
Mm-hmm.
that a better thing for them to do is to ask themselves, why do they feel the need to compare themselves to them as the standard?
Agreed. Agreed. I totally agree with that point. And I think that that comes from you need to figure out and train yourself to change your focus, right? And your focus needs to go from Arnold Schwarzenegger and Chris Bumstead to me last year, me 2 months ago, me 2 years ago, or whatever, right? Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who somebody else is today, right? Because the only person you can rightfully compare yourself to is yourself and who you were the day before, the week before, the month before, the years before, right? So I agree with that. But when it comes to the other side of it, it's like that doesn't mean you should stop working out because your standards are too high for yourself. You know what I mean? Because you don't, in my eyes, you don't deserve. You're not. You shouldn't. It's not a handout. Self-confidence is not a handout. Self-love is not a handout. Just because you exist as a human being, and just because all human beings are equal, yes, they are. But the way you feel about yourself is earned. Do you know what I'm saying? Right? Like,
How do you think one achieves self-love?
keep the promises that you make to yourself, and constantly be making progress towards the standards for your life that are set. And yes, there's the other side of it. Your standards can be too high. They can be. And when they are too high, you're just going to feel pain all the time because you're in pursuit of something that's never going to be achievable, right? Having the Victoria's Secret mindset or having the Chris Bumstead, Arnold Schwarzenegger mindset. Agreed. And at that point, you need to figure out what you're focusing on because typically it's going to come down to all you're thinking about and looking at are other dudes and comparing yourself to other dudes who don't have standards that you rightfully can compare yourself to. You should only be comparing yourself to who you were the day before, right? But with that, you need to make sure that you are going after the things you should be going after for. Does that make sense? Right? And and
Yeah,
and and through those habits that you're building, that's when you're going to love yourself. That's where you're going to have that self-confidence and that self-respect and the self-love because the way to know and the way to feel self-love is to treat yourself as if you were somebody else you cared for, right? So like if I love you, what am I going to tell you to do with your day? Right? I'm not going to tell you to sit on your ass and eat Cheetos. I'm going to tell you, hey, every morning You should sit there and meditate, right? You should exercise every day. You should have your room clean, right? Then maybe spend some time playing the guitar, doing something you love, something that's good for yourself. And then I want you to work on doing your content creation, work on your passions, work on your purpose. Is there a kink in the hose with your relationship here? Work on that. Talk to them. Spend some time doing this. Spend some time doing that. Like things that are good for self improvement, right? And that's how you know if I'm giving you that advice. If I'm giving you that advice and you're taking it, that's how you know I love you and I care for you, because I want the best for the best part of you. But the same thing applies to yourself, almost in the sense of like a third person aspect of like, act out the things that you would recommend to somebody else if you wanted them to live the best possible life as they could. And if your habits and your daily actions are in alignment with that, that's when you're going to feel the true feelings that come with loving yourself. You can't just think yourself there. Again, you can have too high of standards, and that's just a matter of changing your focus. But deciding that, oh, well, I can just love myself, or I can just love myself and I never have to work on myself at all, is complete bullshit. And you won't actually feel it. And you'll be lying to the people like fucking Lizzo or whatever. But I think that's my best way of understanding of like how anybody can get to a place of achieving true self-love.
I agree with the point that we should compare ourselves to who we were in the past and not to anybody else. I think that's an excellent point. And because we don't understand others' experiences, we don't know exactly what other people have been through. So there's no way to compare yourself realistically to somebody else. I agree with that point. However, you said that self-love comes from constantly improving. But if we're constantly seeking improvement and we're constantly seeking, doesn't that mean that we never actually achieve self-love?
No. Because self-love comes from progress, not from perfection. You could still be blissful.
So as long as you're in that process of improving yourself.
Pursuit. The pursuit is where the self-love comes from, right? Because you're acting it out. You know what I'm saying? You don't need to have like even if you're super obese and you're 2 days in, but you're working out both those days and you're eating better those 2 days than you were the 2 days before, you'll feel that self-love. It will grow stronger as you stay more consistent, but you'll feel it.
So if you're constantly making these improvements, what do you do with these voices in your head that are like telling you you're not good enough or you don't deserve this, or what do you tell those voices?
It's really just a matter of focus and perspective and meaning, right? Because what you focus on is what you're going to feel. And you can control what you focus on. You just have to make sure that you're separating yourself from your thoughts. The best way to do that tangibly is through meditation. But if you can go through on a consistent basis, and so like a perfect example is the Chris Bumstead thing, right? So for me, I mean, I'm a small kind of skinny dude, and so, but when I started working out for the first like year or so, once I had the I had the noob gains, you know, I started like loving it, right? I wasn't really paying attention to bodybuilders or anything like that. I was really just paying attention to where I was a couple months before. And eventually I got to the place where I was getting more immersed in the whole bodybuilding world and realizing exactly like comparing myself to these dudes that are fucking giants and are on steroids for that matter, how much smaller I was than them. And so I started to feel shitty as a result of that, right? So I didn't feel worthy of the compliments that I got. I didn't like when people were telling me like, dude, you're like, and I was like, yeah, looking back now, like with a clean and clear perspective, like at the time and even now, I feel like I'm in really good shape, like physically. And a lot of people would say that too. But at the time I didn't feel it. Like I didn't feel it at all. But that was just because what I was choosing to focus on. I was unconscious of it, but that's all I was focusing on. That's all I was consuming.
Wait. So you bring up a really good point. So unconsciously you're focusing on other things. So that self improvement or falling in love with yourself, it's not going to come from just like the progress is important, but you're not going to love yourself just because you're taking cold showers and you're going to the gym and you're doing that. Like that's great, and that is a great first step. But to ultimately achieve that state of self-love,
Mhm.
you need to be able to uncover these unconscious things that we are doing and learn to let go of them from controlling our actions and our behavior patterns. So for
Agreed.
instance, like with you going to the gym, and like that's awesome that someone is motivated to get up early, go to the gym and do all that. But the way to achieve self-love is to actually in example would be to let go of those feelings of comparing yourselves to others so
Mm.
that you can focus on comparing yourself to who you were yesterday.
Yeah, it's really just a matter of catching those thoughts consistently and then choosing to replace them with another thought, building a habit of choosing another thought to eventually where the point to eventually getting to the point where you're unconscious, but the thoughts that are running through your head are not me versus Sebum, the unconscious and I guess new standard or um I'm thinking of a specific word like a the new like fuck what's the word like your new like you get into a video game and like the beginning of the game like you could change like the settings of like what how you want the button set to default. Your new default is now comparing yourself to who you were yesterday, not to where somebody else is today. And I
Yes.
completely agree that as an absolutely necessary part of loving yourself. I just think too much of the conversation, at least from what I've gotten, is about loving yourself for who you are versus building the habits, because I think both are necessary, absolutely
Yes.
necessary. I don't think you can have one or the other in and of themselves and truly have the feelings of self-love. You need to build habits and be making progress in your life, and you need to be consciously aware of where your focus is, and to not be focusing on some not to be focusing on anything and anybody else outside of who you were the day before, who you were the week before, the month before, and the year before. So I think the combination of those two things is where you get self-love from.
And loving yourself is not the same thing as self-love. Loving yourself, it's we're already complete. We're already whole as individuals. Loving Getting to a state of self-love is not going to all of a sudden make us complete or make us worth more as individuals, but it will allow us to uncover what actually drives us, and it'll allow us to do what we want and to embrace out all of our emotions with love and with acceptance.
Mm,
Like it you if you love yourself, you are if you love yourself, that means you love yourself as an individual, but to be in a state of love means that you are accepting all the emotions that happen to you without judgment and embracing them with open arms.
hmm. I never thought about it that way. I've always kind of used those terms interchangeably, but that makes a lot of sense.
Because you can love yourself and still have these thoughts that come into your head of either, let's say, I want to do this to make this person happy, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm scared to do what I love because I care about what they think of me. If you're in a
Mm-hmm.
state of self-love, you will acknowledge that these things happen, and you will be able to pursue what you want to do without being pinged to those things and without following those things.
Mm. Well, that makes a lot
And
of
it,
sense.
and what you said, it catching those thoughts is so important and so
Yeah.
critical. And before you can replace them with these more positive or these more direct actions of where exactly you want to go, you need to understand why they're happening,
Hmm.
and just allow them to surface and to understand why. Because
Hmm.
once you understand why, then it'll be much easier to identify it in the moment and go the other way.
Huh. I think we just painted a whole picture of self-love. Like, I fuck with that. Because I think it comes down to like the both sides of like figuring out why you have certain habitual thoughts and figuring out what your daily habits are. Those are like the two ends of the spectrum that lead up to the top of the tree, right? Because once you figure out why, then you can replace those thoughts that you consistently have that are defeating, right? Once you figure out these habits that you need to build, You actually have the habits that you need in order to develop yourself and keep continuing to grow, right? And once you and on the flip side again, once you're developing a new habit of thoughts, then you're going to get to the point where you're not comparing yourself to anybody else besides who you were the day before. And while if you're simultaneously combining that with building habits and developing yourself and growing yourself in the standard for yourself that's set reasonably but also high, there's your self-love is going to be a byproduct of you doing those things.
100%. And self-help it's not to say that self-help is bad. It's
Yeah.
self-help provides you with all these outlines of behaviors that you can do, but you need to understand what you are doing before you replace them. Because if you just replace them, then you're just think of yourself as just trying to push a boulder uphill, right? You're pushing this boulder uphill, and then whenever this negative self-talk kicks in, it's like the weight is pulling it down. But if you understand why that negative self-talk happens, then you can start to process it, and then you can replace it, and there's much less weight. Think of it as like carrying like smaller rocks up a hill.
Right.
And it's just gradually uncovering and understanding how your subconscious behaviors are dictating your actions, and allowing yourself to feel those when they come up, and then move forward.
Wow. Damn. No, I like that a lot. It's weird because I think self-love, now that I've kind of uncovered a whole other side of it, I think it kind of just fell into my lap because I never fully articulated the other half of it, which was I don't just love myself just because I have these daily habits that I do consistently. That's half of the reason. The other half is another part of the grueling work that I went through, which was replacing the habitual thoughts that I always had.
There it is, 100%. And that is it right there, because if the traditional self-help way, if you were to take away all those things, and I felt this like when I was going through my self-help journey, let's say I was like 2 years ago, I was like cold showering, meditation, stretching, being productive, blah, 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 doing all this stuff, right? If I took away those things, I wouldn't feel good about myself.
Right.
I would feel as if my self-confidence and my self-esteem as an individual was relying on me being in alignment with just doing these things, rather than just being whole with who I am as an individual. And that, like you said, it's that process of that self-love is going to come from that process of understanding how these things are dictating your behaviors, and understanding without questioning them, without bashing yourself for feeling that way, and then changing your behaviors knowing why they're influencing them.
So what do you think? Okay, so let's say you're talking to me in 2018, which was basically the first day I decided I wanted to start aiming up and start whatever it is that I could be doing for myself, right? Let's say I have a clean but not so clean slate. I don't work out, I don't meditate, I have zero habits, and I also have a shit ton of baggage in terms of my internal self-talk and thoughts that I have on a consistent basis. What would you recommend that person do? They say, "Hey, I'll do whatever. Just tell me what it is that I need to do."
What do you want to achieve?
Happiness and fulfillment. As general as that sounds, what would you recommend that person?
Why do you want to be happy and fulfilled?
It's an existential question, is it? Because I mean, for me, the answer would be what else is there to do? What more noble? What is there more noble to do?
Why do you want to be noble?
It's not noble. It's not to be noble. It's like what is there better to do?
Okay, so you're saying that you want to improve yourself to better your state of life right now.
Yeah.
So what is an area in your life right now that is dragging you down, right? Like you said there's like different pillars of your what'd you call it? Your that make up your life, right? There's different pillars,
Oh
like
yeah,
let's
yeah,
say
yeah.
your relationships, your career, all these different things. So
Right.
what is one pillar right now that you would say is bringing you down? Your
Hmm.
state.
So
What
you
is
would
bringing your
say
state down?
focus on one at a time.
I didn't say that. I said what is one that is bringing you down right now?
Well, we're talking about hypothetical. I mean, well, for me,
There could be patterns though, to answer
yeah,
your
yeah,
question.
yeah, yeah.
There could be something in one aspect of your life that is causing you to make decisions in different areas of your life.
Huh.
So think of it as like a weed, right? If you rip the weed out by the roots, you take the entire weed out.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
if you figure out how one thing is negatively affecting your life, I didn't mean to hit my mic there.
yeah.
You can understand how it may be influence you in other aspects of your
Right,
life.
right.
So
So
like for instance, to go back to this, like what would be one pillar back in 2018?
um, I'd say relationships for sure.
So what about your relationships?
I would say like my intimate relationships.
What about your intimate relation? And feel like I know this is on the podcast, so feel free to keep it as vague as possible.
No, no,
Or
definitely
whatever you
like
feel comfortable.
my self confidence and my insecurity led me to be just not a good person, not a good partner. Like just controlling, shitty, not treating
Okay,
people
here
the
we go.
respect they deserve.
Good. This is good that we're understanding why a facet of your life could be dragging down the other aspects of your life, right? So let's say in your relationships, you said what about it though? Like what did you see that was a pattern in your relationships?
Basically, just like anytime that they would hang out with anybody, like if a girl would if anytime my girlfriend would hang out with a dude or whatever, I would immediately just like get super anxious, would be constantly like trying to check her location or whatever, just like see what the fuck she's doing, who she's with, asking her all these questions, you know. I
So
never got to the point that
why
a lot
did
of
you think that she was going to did you think that she was going to cheat on you?
no,
So what were you worried about?
just I think well, I did think the full thing through. I like it's hard for me to like kind of talk about it from a perspective where I've resolved these issues, but I'm like
Yeah.
putting myself back in those
But
shoes.
put yourself like let's say this is you when you're in 2018.
Yeah. Ultimately what was going on was I was just super nervous and jealous, and it was because the mere thought of my girlfriend being either hit on by a dude or whatever just made me feel like oh, like what if she likes him more than me, you know, or what if he goes and sweeps her off her feet and then you know I'm left here alone. And ultimately dug
Mhm.
down to the point where okay, I don't have any self-respect or self-love, therefore I wouldn't be okay without this relationship. And I was attaching my sense
Bam.
of
There you go.
self-love to
Yeah.
that person. And so losing
And
them would completely leave me without this feeling of self-love, which I had painted over what the true feelings were, but it manifested itself in jealousy and in jealousy and just anxiety.
in that period of time, let's say this was 2018 and I was asking you these questions,
Mm-hmm.
you would there would be some sort of emotion that would arise from me asking you these questions. Most likely me doing this would trigger some sort of response in you. You'd be like
Mm-hmm.
you'd probably get angry at me because I'm asking these like these are considered like shadow questions, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these are the questions that you don't want to, your subconscious doesn't want you to think about because you're essentially protecting yourself by thinking that way.
Yeah.
So to go back to like the main part of like what would you say to someone who's starting their journey?
Yeah.
Like I think this self-help stuff is great, right? It's great if someone is genuinely depressed and can't get out of bed and they start going to the gym and that helps them get to the first step,
Mm-hmm.
that's fucking phenomenal. But my general piece of advice would be like what is one aspect of your life that is just that you know you need to work on and you're not working on it.
Mm.
And ask yourself, like, why is that? And when you analyze it, what are some of the emotions that come up? And try to think about some sort of thing that happened in your life that makes you think that way, and allow yourself to just feel that fully. And don't use anything to cope. Don't go on your phone instead. Don't do any drugs to numb it. Just allow yourself to feel it. And then once you allow yourself to feel it, the next time it happens, let's say the next time you're in a relationship, you'll be more conscious when this feeling arises, and it won't be as intense as when it happened before. And the more it happens, the more you allow yourself to feel it, the less and less that feeling will get over time.
Right.
So I know it's not some cookie cutter answer of like, take these 5 steps to do this.
It
Like,
never
you could
does.
probably,
It never
yeah,
is. Never
like,
is.
but really understand what triggers you the most in your life, and then start to ask yourself why.
Why is such a fucking powerful word? Because if you can literally go from anything and just keep asking why and get to a deep ass spot every single time. But no, I really like that answer a lot, man. Got me thinking about my 2018 version of me. What I would have done to get these answers now, then rather. Shit's crazy.
Look, this isn't for everyone. Like, there's like people might do this, and people might stay at the surface when they're asking themselves why. If they're like, why do all my relationships are shit? They're like, oh, because I'm shit. And then they just stay at the surface and they don't get down. They don't get to the reason of why that. And usually it's like some sort of like core belief. And like, I want to give a lot of credit from this. Like, this is not something that I have like came to some deep truth on my own. Like, I've done a lot of reading. I have like a mentor, Julian Blank, who's helped me a lot with understanding this stuff, and a lot of people along the way that have helped me realize this. But in my short life experience, this is what I have found to help me the most. And I have like, I don't talk about this a lot, and this is the first time I'm talking about this openly, but the past, so it's, what month is it? I can't even remember. All right. So it's May, right? So last March, my father was diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer. And like, it was not an easy time at all, right? Like, cancer is deadly, and it's like, especially when it's a family member, and it tore me apart, right? And I was in a place where I was needing to find a solution. I was desperate to find a way to cope with this. I was literally like, I remember when my dad told me, he's like, I have like terminal esophageal cancer. Like, I am going to, he didn't say it like that, but he was like, I have a plan. And I remember going back to my room, and I was on Google, and I was like, how do I deal with a family member that could like potentially die? And I was obsessed with finding a way to, how could I learn to deal with this, to be a better version of myself, and how could I do this ultimately to show up for my family members as well. And this is what I've found to be the most helpful. And it's not easy, right? There are times where like there's times where I wanted to go drink, or there's times where I wanted to distract myself from being and sitting with those emotions. And even though they're so raw and they hurt, and I cried so much. I cried for days, I cried for weeks. But that is ultimately the way of how you can process grief, and eventually not move on from it, but you live with it in you, but it's you learn to live with it, and it's not as
more
intense.
comfortable.
Yes. And there's all the time, like, I have this, actually, this was my dad's watch. Every time I look at it, I think about him. That's why I love it so much. But throughout the day, there's times where I think of him, and instead of it me breaking down and just crying uncontrollably, not being able to control any of my actions, because I processed that and allowed myself to feel that grief, now it's more of like a melancholy that I feel. I smile and I feel love towards that, and I feel acceptance towards what has happened. And it's not to mean that it's okay and it's great. I've learned to accept it, and I've learned to make peace with it.
Yeah.
And that has been incredibly helpful in my life, and I could only hope that more people can start to do this to help improve the quality of their life as well.
It seems like you just became comfortable with that train of thought, right? You allowed it to come through. You didn't try and, like you said, turn it away with drugs or alcohol or with any sort of distractions. You allowed the thoughts to come through when they needed to come through, even if they were the same train of thoughts of grief over and over and over again. You let them come through. You let the thoughts come through. You allowed yourself to feel the emotions you needed to feel. So now you're at a point where you know the train of thought. You see it coming through. You know what it holds within itself. You know why you feel the way you feel. You've dissected those things completely, and so that emotional, so the emotional reaction doesn't have nearly the same amount of valence that it did when those thoughts first entered because of whatever had happened. And I think that's amazing advice for anybody going through anything, right? No matter how big or small it may be, you need to allow yourself to fully think things through as many times as you need to, so you're comfortable with those thoughts. You understand what those thoughts mean, why they're there, and how they make you feel, and how they're affecting your life. Because once you get to that point, you're comfortable with that train of thought. You understand what it entails and why. And once you get to that point, then you can finally allow yourself to move on, because you're not going to be tainted and blocked off by something that you probably are even unconscious of why you feel so agitated or anxious or depressed or whatever it may be that you're feeling, because you allowed yourself to fully comprehend and understand why you're thinking the thoughts that you're thinking and why they make you feel the way you feel.
Yeah.
Damn. That's heavy, bro.
Yeah, and that's ultimately and I'm still working on this every day. Like
Right.
there's things that make me feel like shit. There's times where I question my self-worth, but ultimately what that state of self-love is to, whenever these emotions arise, is to be able to accept them and to allow yourself to feel them for what they are. And it's even people that, even if you're enlightened, even if you're fully conscious of everything that you're doing, there's still things that are going to arise in the moment that are going to make you feel a certain way.
Right.
And you can't control that.
You can't. You really can't. Damn. So what would you call that concept? Would you call it catching your thoughts? Catching and dissecting? I know it's hard to kind of boil it down, but
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's the $1 million question. The one piece of advice that I would have is, whenever you have an emotion, do not judge yourself for it. That is first. If you feel, especially if you feel angry, or I think especially with grief, especially if you're grieving and you're like, why me, or you're scared, don't beat down on yourself,
why not?
because you can't control it. So why would you beat up yourself for something that you can't control?
Right.
And then allow yourself to feel it fully. Allow yourself to run its course within a reasonable time. So let's say this might be a dark example, but let's say with my father, for instance, I I allowed myself to grieve for a certain amount of months, and then eventually life has to go on. You can't spend you can't live an enjoyable life spending your entire life grieving about one thing.
Right.
And that's not to say to rush the grieving process. But if you find yourself taking more time than what seems to be reasonable, there's something that you're doing that is blocking yourself from feeling it fully.
Right.
And that could look like drinking every time you feel these thoughts, or doing anything to numb it, or distracting. Because if you're doing that, you're just pushing it off and you're not allowing yourself to feel it fully. So once these things come up, don't judge yourself. Allow them to feel it fully. Allow yourself to feel it fully. And then eventually you accept it and let go of it.
I like that a lot, man. All right. Well, I think it's a good place to wrap this bad boy up.
Thanks for having me.
Rather saddening ending, but great lesson to come from it nonetheless. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in to episode number 9. I believe it might be episode 10. If it is, then episode 10 of the Jason Scalora Show, back here with Jason Tifford. Definitely not the last time you're going to see him. But yeah, we appreciate you. Like, subscribe, yada, yada. You know the deal. Jason, where can they find you on socials?
I am Talk with Tifford on TikTok, Talk with Tifford on YouTube, and my Instagram's a little bit more personal, so it's on private for now. And yeah, that's it, dude.
All right. Clocking out. Peace out.
Thank you for having me.